Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Political progress in Zimbabwe is painfully slow. The country has had 45 years of independence. And in those 45 years, we failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. I've said on this platform that Zimbabwe is a failed state. And the main reason for it is the failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And so we found ourselves stuck with a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF dictatorship for 45 years. And the nation has paid dearly for it. At the present moment, one of the key issues that the nation needs to move on is stopping Zanu PF rigging the elections. As much as many people now readily accept that Zanu PF did indeed rig the 2023 elections, what some would not accept is that Chamisa lied about stopping the regime rigging elections by plugging the vote rigging loopholes. It is unbelievable. What is the problem? Did Chamisa say ED has no room for rigging? Yes, he did. On the screen is the headlines of the Newsday of July 24, 2023. Chamisa did say he had plugged the vote rigging loopholes. So, if you accept that Zanu PF did rig the elections, then that statement was not right. Chamisa lied then. He did not plug the vote rigging loopholes. Mnangagwa blatantly rigged those 2023 elections. So why is it that some people are finding it impossible to accept that Chamisa lied? Well, the reason for it is very simple, actually. These are people with a binary mentality. They accept A or B, black or white, right or wrong, Chamisa or Mnangagwa, Triple C or Zanu PF. Not only this binary mentality, but they also go one step further. They have to accept that once you have accepted A, then everything that A says or does is right. No questions asked. And the alternative, you have rejected B, everything that he says or does is heresy. It must be rejected. It is that regimented binary mentality that does not allow them to accept that Chamisa lied. Because for them, they have to look at it in terms of comparing Chamisa and Mnangagwa. If I compare Chamisa and Mnangagwa, I have to accept everything Chamisa said. Not knowing here that that is the wrong premise from which to work. What matters here is that the MDC, Triple C parties, the people of Zimbabwe have risked everything to elect them into power on the premise that they will implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That is why the people have risked lives, livelihoods, and limbs to elect MDC leaders these last 25 years. That was what they are supposed to do. Clearly, we do not expect Zanu PF to implement democratic reforms. You do not expect Zanu PF to reform itself out of office. So to say I've got to compare the performance of Chamisa compared to Mnangagwa, of Triple C compared to Zanu PF, in terms of who is going to deliver the democratic changes, it's a foolish position to start with. Because Zanu PF will never implement reforms. Never. Mnangagwa will never implement any democratic reforms to reform himself out of office. So you're asking to judge the performance of Chamisa versus those of Mnangagwa on an issue on which you already know that Mnangagwa will never do anything. But this is the binary mentality. You have got to compare Chamisa compared to Mnangagwa in everything. That is wrong. You have got to compare here, Chamisa, if you want to have your binary comparison, you have got to compare Chamisa with what common sense would dictate the opposition should do. MDC Triple C have been in the opposition on the political stage for the last 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU, when they had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms. They failed to implement even one. Worse still, they have been conning people to participate in flawed elections, to give Zanu PF political legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. The very thing that the opposition was elected to do. That was the primary reason of electing the MDC Triple C, to implement the democratic changes necessary to stop Zanu PF rigging elections. So now, 25 years down the line, You have got to admit that MDC-CCC leaders have failed in the set task. But some people's binary mentality, blinkered mentality, this tunnel vision does not allow them to do that, because it only allows them to compare the opposition to Zanu PF. On the screen there, I've got one of the replies I got from one of the guys on the WhatsApp group, in which, as far as he is concerned, to criticize, to say Chamisa lied, is tantamount to attacking the opposition. Une agenda yekupaza maopposition, he says. In this particular case, he doesn't even accept that the MDC-CCC leaders have been Zanu PF Team B in all but name, playing for Team A to win and for Team A to have legitimacy. This is why they didn't implement any reforms. This is why they've been urging people to participate in flawed elections. In other words, I'm not destroying the opposition. The important thing to note here is that the MDC-CCC opposition are no longer fighting in the people's corner. They pretend that they're fighting the people's corner. They are not. This is why 25 years they've not implemented any reforms. This is why they're participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. To keep on pretending that they're still fighting for the people, they're in the opposition camp, beggars belief. Mankind is supposed to be a creature of reason. That is what, and as it should be. We should be a creature of reason. We should be able to see all the colors of the rainbow and not restrict ourselves to only seeing black or white. Like it or not, Chamisa lied when he said he plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. He was lying. He did lie. Zanu PF went on to blatantly rig those elections and refusing to accept it is foolish, to say the least, because it's refusing to accept reality. We have got to accept the reality on the ground. In this case here, it is important that we do that, because as we approach in 2028, it is clear that Chamisa is once again giving people idiotic promises that he and his group will win the 2028 elections. He has come up with measures to make sure that they win. The equivalent of plugging all the vote-rigging loopholes. And as long as people believe it, as they did in 2023, in 2018, in 2013, and participate in these flawed elections, they will give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the suffering. In that gentleman's argument, one of his arguments that was that I should form my own party. It is and most unfortunate that we seem to be having this mental blockade, because that's what it is. He's saying I should form my own party. Well, to what end and purpose? Zimbabwe had no fewer than 130 political parties in the 2018 elections. But as we know, that did not stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That did not stop Chamisa conning people to participate in those flawed elections, and thus giving the regime legitimacy. It is not having more parties that is going to solve Zimbabwe's political nightmare. I think it is educating the voters, the electorate. As long as there is this large pool of ignorant and naive voters who can easily be conned to do idiotic things like participating in a flawed election to give the vote rigging Zanu PF party legitimacy and perpetuate their own suffering, there will always be a pool of opportunistic politicians on both sides of the political divide, willing to take advantage of those voters. What we need is an electorate that is willing to open their own eyes and see the real world as it is, instead of having this blinkered mentality where they only see things as black or white, Chamisa or Mnangagwa. The world is full of color. The Zimbabwean electorate must see the full colors of the rainbow, and not just the black and white. The Chamisa or Mnangagwa. I repeat, Chamisa did lie when he said he had plugged the vote-rigging loopholes. That is a historic fact. And there are many voters out there who refuse to see it because of their binary mentality, are holding the nation to ransom. Zimbabwe cannot afford to have 2028 rigged elections again. And millions participating to give the vote rigging Zanu PF legitimacy. "45 years of rigged elections should be clearly enough to make everybody realize the sheer futility of participating in elections that you know are flawed. Because Chamisa tells you that he has devised ways of winning the rigged elections. And you're foolish enough to believe him. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good day.